Hi, and welcome to our talk on LLMs for European businesses. Before we get started, a couple reminders. This webinar will be recorded. We also have a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen where you can submit your questions throughout the talk. We'll try to answer them as we go, but we'll also reserve some time at the end to get to as many as we can. If you find this talk interesting and want to contact us afterward, you can contact me at marcus@briink.com, and you can also contact Johannes at nyonic.ai. Quick introduction. My name is Marcus Tedesco. I'm the technical lead here at Briink. We're a startup based in Berlin. We're building applications that use LLMs and machine learning to assess businesses for ESG and sustainability metrics, as well as creating tools for ESG and EU regulatory reporting. I'd also like to introduce our guest, Johannes Otterbach. He's the CTO and co-founder of Nyonic. Nyonic is a startup that's also based here in Germany that is on a mission to build LLM foundation models that are tailored to the specific needs of European businesses. Johannes, I'm very excited about our talk today, and thank you for joining me. A quick outline of our agenda today. We're going to briefly talk just about the basics of LLMs and generative AI, and then we're going to move into EU regulation and data privacy as it relates to LLMs and LLM-powered applications. And then we're going to talk about the adoption of LLMs, the use cases, and how they can be integrated into businesses. We'll save some time at the end, like I said, for Q&A. And yeah, let's jump right into it. If you're on this call, you've probably already heard of LLMs, but let's just quickly outline what these terms mean to give us all a common baseline understanding. So, Johannes, let's start with the basics. What are LLMs and generative AI in layman's terms?
So it's a way where you have a computer program that can mimic human answering and like, at a really high level. The way it's being done is that you expose these kind of machine learning models, these AI models, to vast amounts of text data, and by doing that, you can make the computer reproduce this kind of language. And it turns out over the last 1.5, 2 years that if you do it the right way, you train these models the right way, that they become extremely powerful and knowledgeable in such a way that we can now start to understand like whether or not we can use them in business practices where we are here right now, because they can automate or support a lot of human decision making and make a lot of our work in daily life easier. That's how I would describe it. It's like a very powerful computer machine, like a chatbot that mimics and understands human level textual interfaces.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you more about how we can use these in other interfaces besides chatbots as we get farther along in the conversation. I know you mentioned that Nyonic is building foundation models. Could you describe what a foundation model is?
Yeah, for sure. So foundation models are a fairly new concept. It's actually like a term defined by a group of researchers out of Stanford University to describe this kind of paradigm shift that we have been seeing since the inception of GPT-3. That was about like a little bit more than 3 years ago now. So what it means is that we saw an emergence of capabilities of a language model that goes beyond just the training task that I was being tasked for, right? Like in back in the day, our language models were targeted towards sentiment analysis, like is that a positive or a negative review? For example, named entity recognition, meaning you have a sentence where there's a hospital, a patient name, the doctor's name, when you want to extract all of those information out of a sentence. So these were models targeted to very specific tasks that you do with language models. And what we saw with GPT-3 and also like the earlier papers leading up to GPT-3 is that we are now in a way in a situation where one language model that is just being trained to reproduce human level language suddenly becomes really good at these other tasks that we haven't built it. And because of that, people decide this is going to be a foundation model, because you can do one training to fulfill and automate all of these tasks. And then when you wanted to be better on one task, you can take these foundation models and build on top of this a customization. And that's why it's a foundation. Like the model is the foundation to build a custom solution on top of something with a very powerful capability. Since then, foundation models has been becoming a broader term. We are not only seeing foundation models for languages, but we're also seeing it for images. For example, stability and stable diffusion is a big one. Midjourney is a big one. That's going to be in the image space. We see it for audio generation. We see it for audio, for speech recognition. We're seeing a lot of these kind of models emerging right now. But still, for now, for the most part, foundation models are synonymous with large language models because that's the most developed one, and we'll see this term also being adopted to other modalities as well.
Cool. I'm like, it sounds like there's a shift happening right now between kind of the previous way of building enterprise machine learning powered applications where you would have to train your own models. And now it sounds like these foundation models kind of give you a lot of things out of the box where you can build applications just using these LLM models. Is that how you understand it as well?
This is exactly how I understand it. Is that essentially what you do is similar to what we do with humans, right? Like we are educating humans, we are learning stuff along our life journey, and then at some point we go into a job, and then we learn the job specific skills on the fly. And this is exactly the way that I think about these language models, where we expose them to a lot of data that is available to us through the internet and other open resources. And then once we have this model trained, and then we can use it in domain-specific applications where we can apply it to a specific customer data. There's, of course, some specialties. It's like the analogy is not quite clean, but like you can mostly pre-train a model, and then you need less customer data to actually solve a use case where that previously was unable to be solved.
Awesome. I just want to remind everyone in the audience that you can use the Q&A feature to ask us questions, and I'll try to incorporate them into our conversation. And if we don't get to them, I'll try to ask them at the end. I see some hands up, and I just want to make sure people know they can post them in here. Yeah, I see a few questions in there now. Right now we're going to first talk about LLMs and generative AI in general. Our next topic, we're gonna talk about EU regulation and data privacy, and then we'll start a little bit more into kind of use cases, LLM adoption in the EU, and kind of some future things. Yeah, going back to what we were just talking about, is Nyonic focusing on building any specific types of or any these foundational models? Are you trying to build them to solve any specific type of use case, or a general purpose, or how are you guys thinking about that?
So right now, like the way that we're doing is really a platform type model, right? Like where we can solve a lot of use cases. I mean, if we would do it for everything, that's of course not possible because that just takes too much time and is too unfocused. So we have like a little bit of guardrails on it, and we're really trying to go into like the B2B market. Existing models for the most part are focusing on B2C, and B2B is a very different customer segment that is now still underserved. Partially due to the reason that it has its own idiosyncrasies, and so that's what we're going for. And it's essentially like building these foundation models for B2B applications. The specifics of like how we do like then the integration with customers is TBD. We have of course like certain hypotheses, but it's too early to really dedicatedly say like how are we going to do this in specifics. That's just given the fact that we just started out and we are now having the first conversations. We're building the first model. So give us some time to actually answer that question. I'm sure we will answer it in a good way. But it's too early to make any statement about it.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Also, just curious is for another option for people exploring using foundation models or open source models. Are you thinking about hosting open source models as well as part of this platform, or is it more for LLMs that you build?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know this from your business from Briink, right? Like it's complicated to host models, right? And
Exactly.
so if you build a hosting system, then it doesn't matter whether it's only for your own models or for also open source models. And it depends also a little bit on the customer, right? Like if the customer really already has like integrations with other open source models, but wants to keep on using that model, but maybe change providers, we are certainly going to be open for that. I wouldn't preclude that from the get-go. Also, some of the open source models are quite powerful, so why not using them? But on top of that, we will also train our own models because we also like look at like different types of innovations and ideas to address some of the shortcomings of LLMs that are clearly out there, like hallucination and factual grounding and all that kind of stuff. So that needs, of course, some more work on that end. And so we will also train our own models to try to address some of these issues, especially with tailored towards the B2B setting. And so we will probably very likely do both on that side. And which one we do first depends a little bit also, of course, on our customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know we're at Briink, we're trying to, we're going to get into data privacy in a second, but we are, exploring open source models. And as we've had conversations before, you and I, how hard that can be to host these models. So interested to see where that goes and how we can kind of alleviate some of our customers' data privacy concerns using different technologies and different applications. Yeah, so I've also been thinking about how LLMs can either be LLM as the product, which it sounds like is kind of more what Nyonic has been focused on. You are providing LLMs as a service, and then there's also building LLMs using LLMs as a piece of the product. And I think that's more where we fall, where we're consuming or using LLMs inside of our product to not be the product, but be kind of the technology that allows us to unlock value inside of our product. And it's interesting to see how we're on two different sides of the spectrum, but we have to work together closely to kind of solve these problems, as well as work together to work inside of the EU regulatory space. So I think that might be a good transition for our next topic. I see we're getting a lot of questions about data privacy, regulation, and such. I saw one question asking, would you say that there's a risk for companies and startups building applications using LLMs in Europe right now because of regulations that have been put in place? Let me ask you first, what kind of unique challenges do you think that EU-based companies face in terms of AI, machine learning, data, and such?
I mean, regulations, I'm fundamentally in favor of regulations because like it's a societal contract, right? Like, and I think that's good. Of course, they make it more complicated, but ultimately, complications is what we have to deal with as technologists, and everybody faces their own complications, and you can build it around this. The risk in codes, and I like the fact that the person wrote the risk in codes, is that it's just more expensive, right? And you have to deal with that. And it's but ultimately, if you adhere to those regulations, you also face as a company higher public trust, because like you do that. And I think that's really important also to do customer acquisition. So for example, as Briink is doing, is like you're subject to certain types of regulations. So that's why you're looking into open source models, because you have to have data protection and GDPR compliance, right? And it's for you, it's hard to find like just any vendor for LLMs, and you have to actually face that, right? So if we, as Nyonic, are able to actually adhere to certain types of regulations, we lessen the burden on you, while we don't have the burden of actually figuring out how to do the integration with other customers. So it's a natural, it's very natural structure that emerges as like a platform and like the specialization on top, because we can share the regulatory burden and ultimately helps us. And I'm welcoming it. It doesn't mean that I'm like now jumping in circles and saying yay regulations, because realistically it's gonna make my life harder to build it. But if we're successful, it's also like a good thing, right? It's a good thing for us, and it's a good thing for society.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely makes our jobs harder, but ultimately it's for the benefit of everyone, and so I agree. Yeah, so kind of some specifics on this regulation. In April of 2021, the European Commission proposed its first EU regulatory framework for AI. But just this last month in June, they introduced the EU AI Act, and it's waiting to be voted on. Hopefully it will be voted on by the end of the year. But what are some of the things you think this audience might want to know or need to know about this? I'm thinking about things like, on your side, disclosing training data, as well as designing the model to prevent it from generating things like illegal content, and like how you even do that, as well as data privacy concerns. So passing and storing sensitive data, and what data you use for training LLMs.
So yeah, I can't go too much into details, because to a certain extent this is also like a trade secret of a company. But when it comes to like, for example, preventing illegal output and so on, there's like, of course, standard guardrails that you have to do. And like the way that you think about this right now, in the case where the AI Act is not even completely done, is that you will have to work with customers and see like what is their requirements from their compliance, and what can you as a technologist and a provider of these language models do. And this is also like different in a B2C versus a B2B case, right? In a B2B case, you're not necessarily opening up to everyone, but you're opening up to a specific customer, and then you can work with one targeted customer to make sure like what is their risk tolerance on certain integrations, and what is the level that you need to hit, and that of course requires innovation, it requires new systems design, but I'm sure we can get there. And like the key is that the AI Act, as any regulation, is going to be a guardrail and a guideline to negotiate those things. It's not going to be like a black and white discussion. Similar to GDPR, it's like just because like GDPR says data protection does not mean that everyone's data is absolutely not being able to be used. But it's like it's a negotiation of balancing of interests, right? Classic example is healthcare, where if you have like a significant amount of people that have a certain type of symptoms or diseases, using that data to actually build better healthcare helps a grander people of things. So there's like and the regulator acknowledges that, right? And that's why we have like medical innovation, because we can use people's data in a statistically sound way to move healthcare forward in a grand scheme of things. And it's a while you violate maybe the individual's person's feeling of privacy, you're actually moving society forward. So in that way, like regulations are always a balancing of interests between societal benefits, individual benefits, and the same is going to be true for the AI Act in different ways. And we'll have to wait how this plays out, right? And the same as since you asked, how do you do it with the training data? I'm sure that even from a practical point of view, if the regulator says like you have to open your data sources, like no regulator will go through like several terabytes of data. So there will be some amount of reporting. And so the question is like, how does this reporting look like? I don't know. But are we prepared for this? For sure. And I'm in favor. Actually, the US, since you brought up San Francisco, actually does that in the financial sector. It's like if you're building a model for example, credit loan lending, you as a provider of a loan and making a decision about like the creditworthiness, you have to demonstrate and build certain types of statistical reports on your data, like how biased is it, what's the population that you're targeting, how do you adversely affect, like are you making sure that you're not discriminatory? So these things are already in effect in certain types of industries. So in that regard, it's nothing new. It's just like that the technology with large language models is new, and we have to figure out like how do compliance reports for that look like.
Yeah, I think somebody asked something similar around that, how to address issues of algorithmic bias that exist in LLMs. And it sounds like, the regulation itself can help in certain ways by at least allowing you to identify, like based on the training data sets, what biases could exist, so that you can identify that in the models themselves. Really interesting. It's
but maybe let me make one clarifying comment, because it's an interesting question there, and I want to make a small adjustment, because like there is nothing like an algorithmic bias. That doesn't exist. The algorithm itself is a mathematical structure. There is no bias in it. The bias enters the algorithm through the training data. So the final model is biased, but it's not biased because of the algorithm, but it's based because of the data. So we're talking here about data biases and not algorithmic biases. And that's a very important distinction, because the algorithm itself can be debiased. But what you can do is, like, in order to reduce bias, is to actually address it in a data set. And that's also where the AI regulation goes in. And also here, bias is not necessarily bad. It's the biases that are unwanted are the biases that we don't know about. And that's, I think, why the regulation is so important, to do the data reporting, to do like opening the data source, because at that point you can make studies about like what is your bias, and then you know what the bias the model in the end has, and that's really important. And I think that's also like the case for you. You want to know what kind of data goes in, or how do you think about bias at Briink?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. Right now, the way that we're using LLMs, we're essentially trying to reduce hallucinations and bias and any type of like basically incorrect answers to things by only allowing our responses and for example in the chatbots that we have now on regulatory data and on document chat, as well as in our some of our future products, we're trying to build it in a way that it can only use information that we provide to it in that context, and then try to just use the foundation model as kind of a sophisticated autocomplete, like summarize this, like make a decision based on this evidence, so that we rely less on the kind of quote unquote internal knowledge of the LLM, and more just using it to as both a decision engine as well as a kind of classifier, like some of these classic machine learning use cases, but in a little bit more sophisticated way on a lot dirtier data. So that's how we're thinking about it. Along the same lines, about how we're training foundation models and what kind of training data goes into them. Someone asked a question for you. How are you thinking about training a foundation model now, as a lot of training data, such as social media companies, are blocking access for training? Like where are you guys thinking about sourcing information from? It's okay if this is proprietary and you wanna say, you can just skip this question if it's too soon.
No, that's it's fine. I can at least address it partially. I will not disclose where we get our data sources from for now, but in general, like, social media is only one type of data, right? And that's where also like differentiators come in. It's like I saw also a question about like moding. There is a lot of differences for moding, and the data mix is definitely one, right? And if you're going into B2B, I don't know how much social media data will help you, right, in a B2B setting. Like certainly for a marketing department, but B2B is so much bigger than just marketing. There's also other data sources that are not necessarily easily accessible through just like scraping, but it's nevertheless still available. So you just have to do the groundwork, and you will find a lot of data that is not just like floating around out there. So I'm not too worried about this. Also, eventually, these social media companies will also use the benefit of an LLM, so they will also be hit by AI regulations, by the AI Act. So they will also have to have like certain types of data being put open. There's a lot of force beyond data being like a public good, and then there's like these kind of debates going on right now. So this space is super fast evolving, and it's very hard to foresee where this is headed. But I'm actually not too worried, because for right now there's still like a lot of data that is accessible, and then we also see, for example, organizations coming to us and say, like, hey, we have a lot of data and we would like to work with you to see how this is going. And here we come again, like this is a negotiation. They see the power of these LLMs. They know that they need them. They have the data, but not the know-how. We have the know-how, maybe not the data. So there can always be a business here, and that's the beauty about B2B and instead of B2C. So that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, really interested to see where it goes. I know on kind of on the same topic, like the flip side of the coin, we've got the training data trains the model, but then we actually want to use the model, we actually have to pass data into it. Like I was just describing how we use it at Briink. We take information from documents or websites, or just at this time textual data that we have, and try to source what is relevant to answer questions, or to either answer user-generated questions or answering questions that we have about the data in our system. We have to source that information from our documents and databases, and then we actually pass some of that to these large language model providers. And we've already had several customers that have expressed concerns about sending their data to OpenAI, and we've already gotten several questions in the chat as well, kind of regarding this topic. Like, I don't think that this is a common problem just for EU companies, but I think it's like common for all companies, globally, sending proprietary and sensitive data to third-party providers. I'm curious how you think about like how Nyonic will be different than other providers, for instance, OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, and such, and how will you kind of address those concerns of people sending data to third parties like that?
I mean, there's two different things, right? Like, what's their product in the end, and what's their strategy. And I think, for example, it's very clear, OpenAI is not interested in building B2B products. OpenAI is not a product company. Like they also openly say so, that they are interested in building the next steps towards this concept of AGI, artificial general intelligence, figuring out like what are we going there, and like on the way they might have some interesting applications such as ChatGPT that are nice, but are not really in the game of like fully and broadly commercialize them. The commercialization efforts are always going to be secondary to their true goal, because like they also said so. And I have no reason to believe that they will say one thing and do another thing, right? Then of course there's the question, for example, like Microsoft. Microsoft is not interested in offering like LLM APIs for bespoke models. Like they want to integrate it into like their Office suite and have everybody using Office. and there will be enough use cases that are not office-based that is in there. So it's really important to look at like what is really beyond that organizations, where do they want to go, and what's their main motivation. And then there is going to be nuances in the details, right? And so that's why I think that right now the large language model space, as you also know, is like it's exploding with like a lot of things. We're just scratching the surfaces of use cases and of how the market will develop. There will be many different products and different aspects of it. Classic example would be just look at the platformization of cloud compute. AWS is not interested in actually building like a application for everyone. They're building the structure underlying that so that other people can build on top of that. And it's exactly what we are discussing right now. And then the stuff that you build on top is very different for different people, right? That's how I think about it right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we're like I said before, you know, you and I have had conversations about like how we're addressing this at Briink. Like we're looking into hosting open source models, but as you know, that's quite difficult. You know, some other ways that we've thought about doing data protection is cleaning our data before passing it to any third parties, as well as like we always try to make it very clear that in our application that we are going to be sending information and you need to opt in to have this. But will Nyonic as a EU company have any extra advantages in terms of sending data to Nyonic as a third party over any businesses outside of the EU that are also hosting these large language models?
I mean, that's certainly part of the hypothesis of building this, right? Like European markets are working differently than US markets. There's on the one hand that there's the trust element, like you trust like a European company a little bit more to adhere to the EU regulations than potentially a US based one. You also, as like a customer, have significantly higher legal leverage than in the US. Like if your data breach is in the US, your legal leverages are quite small, whereas in the EU have very different hammers that you can go with about this. You also understand like that the company needs to be it can only be successful if it actually builds its business model around these restrictions. So I definitely think that there's a competitive advantage in adhering with that and building it around that, just because of that. And then there's of course certain types of business domains and verticals that can fundamentally not send it to the US. Like think about like certain types of government regulations. They will never be able to work with foreign data providers or language providers. The medical space is super highly regulated in that regard. Financial spaces too, for that matter. So there are also like just sectors that lack the capability of exploring these options right now, and so being able to provide services for them is already like a big market in itself. So I think that working, understanding the ecosystem, living in it, and breathing this like makes you automatically more attuned to the necessities, and that will definitely help, I think. And then of course, when it comes to data cleaning and how do you handle PII, the more you scrape out of this and the less PII you ingest into your system, the better it is, right? Like that's just like a basic precaution, right? So it's always like the things like think about like what is the personal information that you really need. And that's also like what GDPR tells you, like only use what you really need and make sure that you know what you need and don't use the rest, right? And it's a common, it's more effort, sure, but if you do it, then it's just like codified common sense, kind of.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's always like the flip side of that where you know, the responses that you can get from LLMs when you strip out certain pieces of information can make the responses maybe not as tailored to what you're looking for. Like if we strip out, location data and it has something, yeah, not location data, but just like the general geography and just anonymize that to like country, it might not give you the same types of results. So there's always a balance there, and that's what we're looking for. How can we balance data privacy and the power of third-party LLMs and such, while also making sure we're protecting our clients' information and such. I wanted to quickly ask you, what do you see as some good use cases for LLMs, and maybe some not so good use cases? What would you not want to use LLMs for?
What would I not want to use LLMs for? That's a trick question, right? It's like
Right.
if I'm actually want to learn something, I would not use LLMs, right? LLMs are really they're very powerful. They have a lot of knowledge, and they can limit your learning, especially. For example, I've talking to a lot of coders, and coders are super excited to use LLMs to automate their coding tasks. Yes, I'm supportive of that because it like saves them energy. But if you want to learn something new, using an LLM is bad because like it produces you the code and it most often works, and you're not being exposed to like what are the mechanics of that code. So that's where I would not want to use it if I want to learn something new, right? Because it just like limits the ability of me to learn. What are cool use cases in the same vein is like if one of the things that I'm excited about is that a lot of my time is being spent writing documentation and emails, and some of them are really, really burdensome and annoying. And sometimes you just like are stuck there, it's like, oh, I don't even know how to start this email. And then you just like give it a bunch of bullet points and you get like a super solid draft, and you just have to editorialize it, and that's nice. And so you're getting over these blank page problems sometimes, which is nice, or you just like have to fill in like some fillers, and that's where it's really helpful. So that's one of the things that I'm regularly using it for. But then of course there's like much more advanced use cases that are really cool, and I think that you should actually tell about like what you're using it for, because that's one of the more cool use cases. But it's just not, you cannot use it on the back of the envelope. You actually have to build a system around it. And so I'm curious for you to actually tell us how you use it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so right now we have two live products in our application. We have a regulatory chat that allows you to ask questions about the EU taxonomy as you are kind of exploring it and doing your reporting. So if you're looking at different clauses in the taxonomy, you can ask it questions like, explain this to me, or summarize what I actually need to know about this and how it's linked to other regulations and what you need to know about those. And then we also have a document chat that allows you to upload documents and ask them questions, which is really helpful, especially when doing lots of like due diligence or reporting for funds or for companies that are looking at large troves of documents. And right now we're actually working on a new automated social policy screener that will allow you to be able to dump a bunch of documents into, and we will screen them for your alignment with things like the minimum safeguards of the taxonomy, the UN development goals, and OECD guidelines, and we'll be releasing that in the next couple of weeks, and we're really excited about how we can build interfaces that use LLMs to kind of power the decision making and the analysis of a lot of unstructured data, but then put it into an interface that's not a chatbot, but something where you can very clearly get value directly out of it, and that we're hoping will be a very powerful tool for a lot of our, especially our investor clients that are looking to do due diligence, or just companies that are interested in screening their own companies. All right. I think we should move. We have 15 minutes left. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. Let's. I think you can see this as well, Johannes. So if there's any that stick out to you that you wanna answer while I'm scrolling through here, go for it.
Yeah, I'm also like screening that. I think there's one question that is particularly interesting to me as well. As I'm going to read out a question here. Do you have a take on how to bring LLM to federal institutions? They work mostly text-based, but cannot share their data outside their own nets. So this is a interesting one for a bunch of systems and a bunch of reasons, because like we fundamentally here see the way that like certain structures work and how new technology changes existing structures, right? So here it's going to be a negotiation and a realization on, for example, the federal level part, where they need to open up their own thinking about like their own nets to potentially like federal or nationally centered data centers that have the capabilities of hosting these models themselves. Because like on premise in like their small institutions that might not be necessary and not be possible. But then also technologists helping the government and helping the society to actually build those capabilities in-house, right? Like there's both of these sides have to come together. The government has to realize these are technologies that you cannot just like push locally unless you really want to have like outdated technology. But if you want to state of the art, you have to outsource it to someone that you trust. But then also like the tech sector coming at hand to support the government and the federal institution to do so. And that's part of the things that is exciting about living in Europe, because like there is this willpower to actually come to the table. It just like takes a long time, and it's a classic example of like there needs to be more communication and more realization, and also like regulators and federal governments need to speed up their procurement processes and to simplify it, come to certain realizations, but also the tech sector having the willingness to help them. It's not fundamentally a technological challenge. It's really a challenge of like communication and awareness. And here it needs to be just like a lot of education being done. And I'm sure that we can do it eventually, but it will take some time.
That makes sense. I think there was one question for the Briink side that I wanted to address regarding the document chatbot. Do you use an open source LLM or a product like ChatGPT or other OpenAI model? Do you fine tune it or use prompting? Great question. Right now we are using OpenAI's GPT-4, which is why we've tried to make it clear that this is an opt-in situation, because we recognize that some customers are, like at this moment, are not okay with that, but we are actively exploring. I think, like we've mentioned a couple of times, we're exploring the open source LLMs, and hopefully there's some exciting things that we can do together, both with Nyonic and Briink, to hopefully alleviate some of those data concerns of our customers. Regarding fine tuning and prompting, right now we're using prompting. We are exploring fine tuning as well. That could be either on proprietary models like OpenAI's or in the future using Nyonic's LLMs. But yeah, right now we're doing prompting. The space is evolving so fast. What our goal is really to try to get tools out to our customers as quickly as we can, and provide them value, and then iterate on that so that we can allow even more options and more options for data privacy, as well as configuration and all different things. So we definitely take guidance from our customers and in what your needs are. So we're happy to chat if you're interested in that. Yeah, let's see. A few more minutes. I think we can probably get to a couple more questions.
Yeah. Here's also an interesting one. Do you think that confidential computing will help with secure, privacy-compliant AI and data sharing? have you considered this? So maybe to give the audience a little bit of concept, there's the concept of enclave computing, where you have like certain types of hardware and software based guarantees that whatever you're doing on your chip is staying secure and cannot leak outside of that chip and your enclave that you're computing on. I'm super excited about this technology because if it actually works, it will help solving a lot of problems. And I do think that there is a place for that, and also for data sharing and all of these things. The adoption will be long though, right? It's like the technology is right now not quite ready to be used in production. I think there's like the first prototypes that I've seen out there that are looking in like POC type level implementations. But then it will also take a long time to build like the code ecosystem, the trust, the know-how, and so on. So the adoption curve will be fairly long, especially for very mature businesses. But essentially, I'm very positive on this technology, and I hope that this will come to pass. And I'm much more hopeful for that as compared to like homomorphic encryption or other kind of computing clusters. So this is something that I'm personally also on the lookout for. And when it comes, hopefully adopt this as quickly as we can, and see that there's a good opportunity for also Europe to get its hands in the game of adopting that technology.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where you guys take this. Another question from Partha was, how can you build a moat around these LLM applications? And I have a few thoughts on that, and I'm curious to see if you have anything else. So, I think right now there's been a huge explosion of these chatbots, right? Like we have them as well. But I think that the real power that comes from these LLMs is going to be the ways that you build them into systems, not just they're not the core product. They are they're a tool that you use inside of products. So at least from my perspective, I see the companies and the teams that use LLMs that are going to be successful are the ones that are doing the things around the edges that make their business unique. So, for example, for us, we are focused on regulations, a lot of regulations and frameworks, and the way that we process that information and store it and can retrieve it in order to give it to kind of pass that information to an LLM in a way that gives it the full context of what it needs in order to kind of summarize or answer a question or make a decision or classify something is really like where a lot of that power comes from, as well as on that same note, the kind of domain specific knowledge. So optimizing parts around the LLM for the information retrieval, like I said, or fine tuning models on industry specific data. But I also see, like, from an interface perspective, I think defining domain specific interfaces. So things where the LLM is integrated into a tool and not just the tool, you're not just asking a question of an LLM. You are like, customers might not even know that you're using LLMs in the background because it's coming out in a totally different way than potentially just purely text-based. And then also just the way that you kind of own the customer relationship and establish those relationships. So like for us, we also provide real human ESG and sustainable finance experts as well. So having those types of things like going to differentiate companies from just anybody that's making like a ChatGPT wrapper. I'm curious if you have any other thoughts about how the companies differentiate themselves.
No, I think that this is you summarized it nicely. I see it in the same way. It's like you have to build them into a holistic offering as a product, right? We do it as like a platform technology, versus you are doing it as like a specific use case solution. But ultimately, I think that's the right way to think about it. And I might want to rephrase it a little bit in a question like, you also build a moat by thinking about applying new business models, right? Like the language technology is extremely powerful, and a mode can be built by taking an existing problem and turning it on its head and figuring out like how can I solve it with like a foundation model, and thinking through like, is this actually a new product, right? Like, the technology is similar to like the invention of the internet. That's what it's being held for. So we're just scratching the surfaces of like what is even possible with these things, and a lot of applications that we thought are not possible to be built will be possible to be built with the support of these new foundation models. And so the challenge here is to come up with those things, because what we tend to do is like take existing things and just like slap an LLM on it and then say like, this is going to be a new product, and that's almost certain to fail. But take something that is slightly out of reach, where you think it's maybe not possible, and like just try to push on that. Or taking a long-standing problem that is maybe has been solved already for 100 years, and to rethink that product completely. So it really takes rethinking and tinkering with it, and not just like taking what already exists and slapping an LLM on it. And that's maybe like the different way of saying like, just don't wrap an API and call it a product. That's not what it's going to be for, and that's not what's going to be a mode.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm really excited to see kind of the applications and tools and technologies that like arise from this this new wave of advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence. We have just a couple minutes left. I kind of want to just get your idea of, I have one last question for you. Like, what do you see as like coming next? Like, what are you excited about? Like, just kind of going off of this question and this that we just talked about. Like, what do you see as like in like 5 years? What do you think interfaces with like artificial intelligence are going to look like, that potentially like people listening right now might start thinking about, and maybe even creating companies around now?
Yeah, it's hard to feel. Like, let me answer this with like a story that I personally like, that always reminds me of that when I get asked this question. By doing so, I will reveal how old I am, because I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I'm like part of like the old generation with Captain Kirk and so on. And there's this technician called Scotty. Some people might still know this person, and they're traveling back in time. And in their original timeline, they are able to talk to computers and interact with computers in very intuitive ways, like how we always want to interact. And he travels back in time and is faced with computers from the 80s that he cannot talk to. And then he's being set in front of this computer, and he has like a keyboard and a mouse. And then one of his colleagues gives him the mouse and says, maybe you have to talk this. And he picks up the mouse and says like, computer, talk to me, computer, before somebody points out like, you have to type in the keyboard. And it's like, oh, that's so old school. And he starts typing on the keyboard. And that's just to say, I cannot tell you what it will look like and what I'm excited about, but I know that the days of keyboard and mouse are probably accounted for, and that we will have very, very different interfaces that are very intuitive, which also brings me to a field that I'm super excited about, that I think is a massive growth potential, is UX of AI. Because as you know, it's like if you're playing with your smartphone, like UX design is really important, because otherwise the apps are not easily accessible. But for AI, we don't know what it is, right? People tend to take an AI as source of truth, but it's never going to be like perfect. So we have to figure out like, how do we design interfaces to interact with statistical systems? And I'm super excited about this, and there's not enough people doing that right now, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see where the future takes us, and both in the short term and over the next, several years. And yeah, so it looks like we're at time. We should start wrapping this up. I'm super looking forward to exploring how companies like ours can work together to find solutions to address a lot of our European customers' data privacy concerns. I'm super excited to see where you guys go. Just a reminder to everybody, Briink is going to be releasing a new LLM powered social policy automated screening tool that I talked about a few minutes ago. We're going to release that in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for it. If you're interested in early access, I'm sending a a link out to the chat for you to sign up for the wait list. You also have our contact information over here, and I can go back. Here's our email addresses as well if you want to screenshot these. Feel free to reach out to us, and thank you all for joining. And Johannes, good luck, and thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. Thank you for having me on your webinar. It was great, and all the luck to you as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining, everybody.